Thanks, Amber. Appreciate it. My name is Nick Samard. I'm a water conservation specialist here with Valley Water on our conservation team. I work really closely with our landscape rebate program. I manage our WaterWise outdoor survey program. And obviously I work really closely with our webinars here. So we're really happy to have you all joining us here. And we're really excited to learn from Amber and the rest of the G3 team, but we also want to take what they're teaching and let you guys take some action with that afterwards, and Valley Water is here to support that action. So next slide, please. So just a little bit of background. Why is conservation important, right? It's pretty obvious. Water costs money. So, the big overarching theme here is we're going to save money for all of you. We're going to ensure we have a reliable water supply. About 50% of the water from Valley Water is imported. We also count conservation as a water supply here at Valley Water, and so the more water that we conserve is the same exact that we don't have to import into the county. Additionally, there's the water energy nexus that a lot of people don't take into account when using water. So significant amount of energy is attributed to moving water and to water use. So it's really taking down two birds with one stone at that. Next slide, please. So looking into the water use of our county and how it's used, about 55% is residential and 31% is business. A lot of people like to, usually attribute agriculture to super high water use. And while it can be, agriculture doesn't really take up a significant portion of our county's water use. When you look at indoor, leaks are 12%. That's something that I want everyone to look at. That's water that's not being used whatsoever. It's being completely wasted, and in many cases, if not most, it's causing damage to other parts of your property or your house. So, getting rid of those leaks and detecting those leaks is pretty important. Next slide, please. So in the last slide, another element of that was that half of the water use is indoor and about half is outdoor. That means that you can make some really big strides by making some either behavioral, but also big landscaping changes. And so we're here to help with that. While we do offer some indoor conservation items, such as our programs, such as our e-cart, where you can request free water saving devices. We also have our landscape rebate program, free surveys, gray water rebates, and a whole lot more. And I'm going to get right down into that over the next few slides here. Next slide, please. So I mentioned our online shopping cart. We offer aerators, shower heads, hose nozzles, leak detection kits. We offer that really awesome sustainable landscape guideline that we partnered with G3 to create. And all of these things can get sent to your house, apartment, townhouse, whatever it may be, ADU, as long as it is within Santa Clara County. So you can be a renter, owner, it doesn't matter. We'll send it to you. We won't even charge you for shipping. So products are all free. The shipping's free. So it's very, very easy to do. Put in your address and request. Next slide, please. We also offer some surveys. I mentioned that I manage our WaterWise outdoor survey program. So you can book a survey with us. What we'll do is our irrigation specialists will come on site. They'll turn on all of your irrigation system. They will look at every single zone to try to find any leaks or upgrades that could potentially be made. If there is a leak, again, they'll alert you where it is, and they can even calculate how much water you're losing or wasting there. Additionally, they can reprogram your irrigation controller for you. So if you want them to schedule your irrigation to be at its most efficient, we can do that for you. We also have recommendations for what other programs you could participate in based on that. So maybe you have overhead irrigation that's irrigating some shrubs. You can convert that to inline drip, and we'll give you a rebate for that. Maybe you have some lawn, right? You want to remove the lawn potentially. We can give you a rebate to remove the lawn. Maybe you're not ready to remove the lawn yet. You can upgrade the overhead irrigation on there to high efficiency models. So we have a lot of options, even some rainwater capture options. We also offer our large landscapes program, which are for commercial sites. So larger commercial sites, it does water budgeting. It also offers some surveys there. and just really helps stakeholders for those larger sites get a lot more autonomy over their water use and better understanding over how much water their landscape really should be using. So, next slide, please. And so I mentioned this a few times already. This is our flagship landscape rebate program. You can receive up to $3,000 per site on a residential basis for doing some upgrades. So that could be it could be all lawn conversion. It could be a combination of lawn conversion, irrigation upgrades, and rainwater capture elements. So it's a really diverse program. I'm going to get into the irrigation elements later, but essentially it's lawn or pool is what would qualify existing lawn or pool, and you'd be putting in a low water use landscape and 50% plant coverage and efficient irrigation within the area. So next slide, please. So I mentioned some irrigation upgrades that could be made through the landscape rebate program. Some of those could be, converting that overhead irrigation for shrub and tree areas to inline drip. Those high efficiency nozzles and bodies, the pot overhead irrigation that you could upgrade. It could also mean our most popular rebate that we go through is the weather-based irrigation controller. So if you have a standard sprinkler timer that you're just setting on a seasonal basis, we'll rebate you to install a weather-based irrigation controller. Essentially, you're going to have so much more autonomy over your water use. You're going to be able to control it from your phone. It's going to take satellite weather data into account when making that irrigation schedule for you. And then it can be paired with really cool accessories like rain sensors, which, if you live in an area that maybe has a microclimate that, maybe the weather channel is not saying it's raining where you're at, but it is. This is a great add-on to that. It's going to absorb any water and tell your irrigation controller, hey, it's raining, stop irrigating. You can also pair it with a flow sensor. So these are devices that go onto your irrigation valves. They're connected to the controller, the smart controller, essentially. And if it detects, it learns your water pressure and the flow in that zone or that valve. And if it detects that there's irregular pressure, it's going to let you know. Essentially, that means there's a leak. It's going to shut off that zone as well. And then you now know the general area where the leak is. You know that it's not going to continue leaking, wasting money and damaging your property. And then once you fix the leak, you can override it, and now we're flowing again. So again, a lot of autonomy. Imagine you're on vacation and your irrigation starts to leak. You now know it's at least not going to just keep running for you. So yeah, they're really great. Next slide, please. And then I mentioned we have some rainwater capture elements. So installing a rain garden, installing rain barrels, or installing cisterns. Rain barrels, I think a lot of people know what those are, but they're essentially a barrel that's catching the water off your downspout. You can reuse it to irrigate your landscape. Cisterns are just a larger rain barrel, is the best way I can describe it for you, 200 gallons or more. And then the rain gardens are sort of, you can kind of see some photos here that Amber's sharing for us, that little barnyard door, so to speak. There's a red and white building there that has the downspout diverting into that dry creek bed. So couple things that are happening here. I like to say the rain garden is fashion and its function. So it looks really great in your landscape, and it also serves a really great purpose. About 40% of our water in the county is from the ground, especially if you're in South County, Gilroy, Morgan Hill, San Martin. And so instead of the water going down the street into the storm drain, this is recharging our groundwater table on a residential basis, number one. And also a really important element of the rain garden is that it's just going to keep that water into your landscape and maintain the moisture of your landscape significantly longer than it would otherwise. So maybe you'd have to water a few days or maybe even a week earlier without having one of these. So and then again, they look really aesthetically pleasing. It's a great design to add on to your landscape, and we'll give you up to $300 back to install one with your conversion. So it's a pretty sweet deal in my book. Next slide, please. So we have also this is another program I manage, our gray water laundry landscape program. So if you want to divert your laundry water into the landscape, we'll give you a rebate to do that. And it's all gravity fed. There's no permit required. You don't technically have to even hire a professional to do it. If you're handy or you have a friend who's handy or family member, they can come over and do it. It's between $200 and $400 rebate, the highest rebate in the state for these projects. And that pretty much pays for all the parts if you wanted to do it. So it's a really cool technology. You already paid for the water. you might as well use it again to irrigate your plants. Next slide, please. And then water waste. So I mentioned that 12% of indoor water use is leaks. You know, we don't want leaks. They're not good. Simple as that. And so if you know, I personally wake up very early. I walk my dog. I go fishing very early in the morning. So I see what you see in this photo, which is like a geyser of a sprinkler head going up because I'm leaving at 3 to 5 in the morning. People typically aren't leaving at that time, so they don't know that their irrigation head is broken and maybe geysering like that. And so if you notice that, you can always take a picture of it or send us an email or give us a phone call and let us know where it is, what's leaking. And what we'll do is we'll send a letter to the property owner and let them know this is what's been noticed, and you know, here's the rebate programs we have to help you fix the leak. So it saves them water, again, less damage to the property, and you know, it's a win-win. They get to upgrade their system. Next slide, please. Okay, and then if you could go to the next slide real quickly, Amber. We're gonna save the Q&A for anything in the chat. So if you have any Valley Water program questions that you want answers to, you know, I can answer them in the chat. Anything rebate program related or any of the services or tips we offer, I can do that in the chat. Also, G3 has, you know, subject matter experts here, and they're going to be doing the Q&A as well for any specific questions. And I think Anna is going to send out more resources later. So thank you.
Great.
Pass it back to Amber.
That's awesome. There are some really amazing benefits that you offer there with Valley Water. I'm very impressed. The gray water. I thought you mentioned a pool conversion too. I'll have to see if that comes back in the Q&A. I don't think I've heard that before, a pool conversion rebate. Was that what you said?
Yeah, we count it as a high water use landscape. And so just like lawn, we would allow the pool to be converted.
That's great. I need to talk to my people down here in Long Beach. Thank you. So we'd like to know what other courses that you may have attended. There's a poll coming up. We have several classes that are wonderful classes. Outdoor leak detection, like Nick said, what an important thing that is to do to make sure that your entire landscape is functional, efficient. Garden design workshop from grass to garden. That one's a great one if you ever have attended it or plan to. That talks about those swales and those rain gardens that he kind of mentioned as important aspects of design that captures as much water as possible into your landscape. Protecting the trees, rainwater capture, again, very specific to capturing rainwater, and then watershed-wise landscaping. So just curious what other classes some of you have attended so far. Looks like we have the garden design workshop has been one, and none. So that's great to know. So now you know that there's other courses that you can attend, other webinars that might be beneficial to you. Thank you, Marianne. Okay.
Actually, Amber, I just wanted to add for our audience members is that all the classes that are done for Valley Water are recorded. So if you see one and you haven't attended, you can go to the website and look at the recording, and it's available in the multiple languages. So, you know, if you're curious about rainwater capture, that class is available to you, even if, you know, you didn't attend it in person.
That's a great benefit. Many classes are not recorded, so it's wonderful. Thank you, Marianne. And just to remind everybody, Marianne's available for your Q&A questions. Don't use the chat option at this point, use the Q&A. And there's Marianne ready to answer your questions. This is our puzzle piece, kind of what we use to describe the pieces and elements of the topics that we'll be going through over the course of this webinar. We have about less than an hour to go through this topic of landscaping with kids and pets. We will stop a little bit early so that we can talk together about some of those Q&A questions that came up. But these are the topics that we'll be going through. Before we do that, I want to just introduce myself a little bit more. My name is Amber Tippett. I'm with Green Gardens Group. I have a background in sustainable agriculture and environmental studies at UC Santa Cruz. And since then, I've done many, different things professionally. A lot of them had to do with organic farming. I'm a landscape designer currently. And before that, I did work with children in school education programs. So I ran several school garden education programs down here in the South Bay area and Redondo Beach area, and also the school garden for my children's school. So I have 4 children. 3 of them are teenagers now. One is only in 2nd grade. So I do have quite a bit of experience with kids in the garden. And so it's been really fun to be able to put together this webinar for you, kind of thinking through some best practices and ways that you could think about incorporating, bringing in your kids and your pets into the garden with you. We always like to talk about at G3, and Nick talked about this as well, a watershed-wise approach can happen in any garden. So what we want to do with our spaces that we have, our home area, our yard, our front yard, our backyard, is think of it as like a mini watershed. So while a conventional landscape, like Nick talked about, walking his dog, you see conventionally a lot of concrete, you see there's a lot of compacted soil in those landscapes. You'll see a lot of water running off of the property, impermeable surfaces. And what that leads to is a depleted aquifer. And what we want to instead do is create a watershed-wise landscape in our own front and backyards. So in that type of landscape, the water stays on your property using different techniques. So he mentioned the swale or the dry creek that you can do. We also talk about permeable paving. We want to really emphasize a living soil using compost and mulch. A living soil is like a sponge. So whatever water that we get, the soil can hold on to that water and then eventually slowly percolate it down to regenerate the aquifer. Rather than in the compacted soil, the water just hits that compacted soil. It's more like concrete than soil. It's not alive. There's not areas of air and areas for the water to go through. There's not that microbial activity that a good living soil has. So that water just runs right off into the storm drain system. So we want to do as much as we can, and this applies to any garden that we're going to create. So if we're wanting to create a kid and pet friendly landscape and garden, then we can also apply these principles to doing that. Also, we want to select climate appropriate plants and use highly efficient irrigation whenever necessary. This is a picture that my son Benjamin brought home earlier in the year. This is his 1st grade drawing here, and he brought it home right at the perfect time. I was putting together the content for this webinar, and I just thought it was perfect. It shows a water cycle. So as we're talking about bringing kids into our landscapes and our gardens, there's so many opportunities that we can use to teach them about the water cycle and to start to help them to understand how important water is for life. And in California in particular, how important it is for us to be careful with conserving our water and doing every little thing that we can to have a healthy water system for generations to come. And some of the things we'll be talking about in this class is also just how do we teach kids to embrace nature as a whole and connect with nature through our own garden setting and whatever small place that we can do that. Because we know that kids love water. Kids love playing in water, they enjoy water. I think using that joy of water, we can teach them about how important water is for the future. We want children to be able to enjoy water into the future. And so we also can do our part to make sure that we have plenty of good, clean water for our children and our pets to enjoy. Pets as well. Don't they love the water? I love that picture of the dog. So the first puzzle piece that we want to kind of talk about and think about as we consider bringing kids and pets into our garden is why. I think if we know what our why is, it helps us to push through whatever obstacles and challenges may come our way. So think about for a moment, and I'll have a couple of ideas. What is it that brought you to this webinar in the first place? Maybe you have children in your neighborhood, your own children, grandchildren, nieces and nephews. What is it about gardening with kids and pets that made you interested in this topic in the first place? So here's a poll. We have some ideas here. I think we'll talk about a little bit on the next slide too. Sensory development, it teaches delayed gratification, reduces stress. The exercise, create a sense of place, connection. So we have, well, reduces stress is a big one so far. That's great. Thank you, Marianne. Yeah, so in this class, we have reduces stress by almost a landslide exercise as well. That's wonderful. So the reason for thinking about what your why is and reducing stress, I think, is a wonderful one in this world that we live in. I know, of course, like I mentioned, having 3 teenagers, there's so much anxiety. There's, of course, with what's happening now, there's unrest, there's fear, and we can help our children and also our pets feel those as well, to reduce the stress by bringing them into the natural world and having a connection, and feeling, you know, that sense of calm that being in a natural environment can bring. So knowing your why as you're gardening with your kids, gardening with pets, and there's destruction and chaos and things aren't happening the way that you think that they should or planned that they should, you can remember, why am I doing this in the first place? Okay, it's to reduce stress. How do I do that in this moment? All these other benefits as well. Because we see with our technology-driven society now, there's so many opportunities potentially that are lost. I mean, obviously we use our phones, we use our technology to just make it through the day to be able to function now. But what opportunities could there be if we had moments of putting the technology away and connecting with one another, connecting with nature, having a garden space that's thoughtfully designed to draw our children and draw pets into the outdoor space and really enjoy it. Because then you could have found opportunities to explore, to discover, to connect, to release. These are kind of the big picture why this is important. After you've talked about and thought about what your why is, it's good to start thinking about, how do kids and pets actually view your space? Because as adults, you know, we lose touch with what it was like to be a child. And of course, we can only guess and speculate what it's like to be an animal in the garden. But if we could take a moment to think about the garden through their eyes, it's a very valuable exercise. For example, what you see may not be what they see. There's a couple other slides like this that I found from this person online. This is a conventional classroom setting. We look at it and we just say, these are desks and this is where you learn and you could focus, because there's little distractions, but what they may feel and what they may see is more like a prison sentence. What we see is just a bed, and what they see is something to jump all over, like a trampoline. What we see is just this regular living room floor, and what they may see is the floor is lava. So that was one of my favorite games that I played with my brother when I was a child, and that still is now because my kids have done it too, imagining that the floor is lava and you put, pillows and things to jump from thing to thing so that you don't get burned in the lava. So that, keeping in mind that children may see things differently than we do, we want to collaborate with the kids on the design. So what that does is it creates buy-in. It gets the children excited about what might be happening. It gets them involved in the dreaming and the process of creating a new garden for them to enjoy. And it ensures that there's elements that they would enjoy and that they can pick. So they can pick specific plants and visual features that they would really like to be a part of. We'll talk more about that as we go. We want to invite them to use all of their senses. So we talk about favorite colors, favorite smells, favorite flavors, and of course, we want to utilize their amazing imaginations. Because if you've been around kids at all, you know that they can come up with some wacky ways to use things that you've never thought to do before. And it really helps to kind of go with that with them. It keeps them excited instead of pushing them down and saying, no, we don't use it this way. How could you work with them to use it in the way that they see it? So moving on to kind of specific design elements for kids. We know now what the why is. Why is it that you're doing this thing? Why is it that you're either designing or redesigning your garden specifically for kids? And we've thought about how they may want to use the garden, how they may see things. We can now talk about some specific design elements that will help them to enjoy the garden. So one thing to think about is moving from the conventional playground, kind of the same playground elements that you'll find, and translating that into elements into your own space. So you can see at a playground, the plastic playground equipment, there's things for them to climb. What else could you use in your garden that they could climb on? You could find and use free and recycled objects to do play activities that they may use with kind of conventional toys and plastic toys inside, but bring them outside. You can use logs and boulders and stumps, for example, to play and jump and climb through instead of the conventional things that they might find in the playground. But we know the playgrounds are designed for kids to play through, so those have been thoroughly researched. We can think about that in our own space as well and just translate it into a more natural environment. We want to foster imagination and adventure. So remember, we're seeing the world through their eyes. You can use found objects as props for storytelling, for example. Help them to tell stories as they're playing, as they're going through things. Maybe they're having a pirate adventure. Help them to create, to explore, to dream, and to build in the garden. Consider when you're designing your space or redesigning your space, consider their interests and provide opportunities for them to develop those interests. So you have a child that's very artistic and you see them interested in that. How could you create a space in your outside area where they could create, where they could do art? You have a child that really loves to build. If they love Legos inside, maybe they might love to build as well outside. So as you're thinking through what's going to bring my child to the outside, what's going to help them put the iPad down, turn the TV off and want to be outside, what could you have out there that really sparks their interest and makes them excited to do that? Some ideas are paths to a secret garden. I mean, just in garden design in general, it's always better to lead people through, have their eye follow through and be curious about what's around the corner, and not just have a big rectangle and you can just see everything at once. There's no sense of mystery there. So kids also love a mystery, so they want to explore and see what's around the corner. Provide a safe place for them to do that, where you know it's safe for them to go and reduce that stress, you know, in their own special area. Kids love stepping stones. You know, they love jumping on rocks. They love going from thing to thing. Again, the floor is lava. They love doing that. So you could provide the stepping stones and have obstacles kind of in the way to go up and over or down below. Think about maybe they want a place to gather with their friends or a place to be alone. Of course, edible garden beds are a wonderful thing to add in a children's garden. Like I said, I did a lot of school garden education programs, and the basis for that program was more about childhood obesity prevention, because the kids that were able to grow their own fresh vegetables were more connected with where food comes from and would more likely make those healthy food choices. So if you could emulate that in your own space, that's a wonderful gift to give to them. Kids love the water features, of course, and an outdoor learning area is such a wonderful thing. If they're doing homework inside, why can't they do homework outside? It helps them to develop their sense of focus. Again, kind of going back to technology, kids' attention spans are getting smaller and smaller. The more we can expose them to, you know, actual natural distractions and still help them to focus, the longer their attention spans can get. Just being in nature helps to expand their attention span as well. Imaginative playstations and garden art. That's a wonderful activity to do with kids in the garden and a wonderful thing to design into your garden space. Talking about what plants to choose when you're designing a garden for kids. This is actually good for any garden, but we want to choose California native and climate appropriate plants. We want to promote that biodiversity. It creates a sense of place. And what I mean by that is having native plants and even plants that are particular to your microclimate and your area, and helping the children to know that this is a special place and these are special plants for this place. It does help them create and understand a sense of place in a different way. And of course, we're conserving water doing that. You want to consider all the senses with children. So sunflowers happen to be, you know, such a magical flower to plant for kids because they get so big, and scale is wonderful. What do they like to taste? What do they like to smell? Again, get their input on what they would like to experience in the garden. And invite wildlife. We can use plants in our design to invite wildlife. So when we choose, again, regional and native plants, we're inviting that biodiversity. Calscape.org is a wonderful website that you can use. It has a searchable database, and you could actually search by whatever wildlife you're interested in inviting into your garden. So you really want to promote hummingbirds. You really want to promote, you know, the monarch butterflies or bumblebees or birds. You can actually search through that. And you can search, I think, pretty specifically regionally what plants to choose. It's a wonderful resource. We want to kind of redefine what is acceptable for children. We've noticed that over the course of time, when kids are less involved in being outdoors and less involved in digging in the soil and exploring and climbing and all of those things, they're starting to get afraid of certain critters that may be in our landscape and in our gardens. So we want to talk with our kids about how important it is to have worms, how important native bees are, how all of these elements provide a balance to our ecosystem, and they all have a place and a role to play in our environment. This is a long list of plants for butterflies. I'm not going to talk about all of them. Again, you can go to calscape.org to see more, but just so that you know, it's not just the milkweed, but those are wonderful to plant. There's so many other plants to consider when you're choosing a design and what type of plants that you want to include into your garden setting. You may want to have more plants for birds as well. So many options here. I love the Mahonia. That's what you see there. There's a western bluebird there, manzanita, lemonade berry is a beautiful shrub, elderberry. So all these shrubs provide, food for birds and invite birds into your landscape. If you have a lawn, maintain it organically. And there's also other options to a conventional lawn to consider. So if you are converting your lawn to something else, then you might want to consider other options. And we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So now we can talk about design elements that are for pets. We talked about what's your why for doing this. That could be your why for kids and pets, or one or the other, through their eyes, and design elements for kids. And now we can talk about pets. Similarly to considering how kids look at the garden, keep in mind your pet's natural needs and their tendencies. And I didn't mention it specifically, but of course, different kids have different tendencies and different pets have different tendencies. So you may have, 2 dogs, but this dog can't stop chewing and eating things, and this dog doesn't do as much of that, or does more digging, or whatever it is. We want to provide places for rest and for shelter for your animals, and appropriate places for them to do what they need and they want to do. So instead of kind of fighting with what your pet's natural interests and needs and tendencies are, maybe consider how to go with it and design with it so that you're not kind of fighting against the current. We want to provide protection, of course, for our animals. I love this picture of the cat on the fence and the dog, just looking at the kitty, and rabbits. I'm curious, maybe you can tell Marianne what kind of pets that you have that you're thinking about, redesigning your garden for. Something to consider with your pets is making sure that you're mending your fences regularly so they can't get out and also they don't get hurt. And then try training your animals. I've tried putting my cat on a leash and it did not go well. So, but some cats apparently could do it. So I don't know what you think about that. When you have animals and you have precious plants, you want to provide protection for those plants. So if you're considering a vegetable garden and you have animals, there are ways that you can protect them. So fences, cages, netting, and pots, raised pots, might help to protect your vegetables or whatever special plants that you have that you're trying to keep away from damage by the animals. And what do you do when they do their business? Because they are going to do their business. So some of the potty training tips for dogs is you want to have a spot that's easily accessible to them, away from the play zones, away from the garden beds, where they know that they're trained to go to it. So you have your spot, it's where you would like for them to go. You lead your dog there, guide them to it, and you want to make sure that you have positive reinforcement. You want to use command words that they know means to go to the bathroom there, praise them. The consistency is key. Obviously, that's true for children too. And for the dogs, maybe visual markers may help. So if you go from one surface to another, they could feel the difference on their paws and know that this is a different kind of place than the one that they just left. Where you remove your pet waste, then you want to leach that area with water and then add compost to it. We know that compost is rich in microbial activity, so those microbes will help to break down the enzymes and the bacteria and things in the waste. We want to emphasize that artificial turf is not the way to go. It's very hot on the paws in the summer. It's actually very hard to keep clean. You have that smell of urine that sticks around. There's a lot of products that they advertise for it, but it's difficult to keep it smelling good, especially with that hot sun. And I've had situations where, you know, there's a reflection from a window on a house onto the turf, and it actually burns the turf, it burns the plastic in a rectangle from that reflective heat down onto it. So it's very bad for the environment. And the main thing that we care about all these things, but it also destroys the soil sponge that I spoke about at the beginning of the webinar. So the soil sponge being alive and active and rich, when you put artificial turf on top, it just cooks everything and it suffocates everything, and it makes for that compacted, dead dirt that we're trying to avoid when we're talking about a watershed-wise landscape. Instead, you might consider these materials for potty area. The wood mulch, like the smooth kind of mulch if you can, like playground mulch. Bare soil actually works fine. And then smooth pebble. And then the living mulch or the natural lawn is a good alternative as well. So a natural lawn is one that incorporates more clovers and wildflowers. They're lower water, they require less maintenance, less mowing, and there's new mixes that are becoming available more and more for this. So maybe look into that natural lawn instead of a conventional lawn. Let's talk for a moment about safety considerations. Some things to keep in mind, of course, when you're working with children or with pets is injury prevention. So we want to make sure that we're keeping track of our tools and we have a safe place to put our tools. Child-friendly tools are great. We want to monitor our kids closely when they are using their tools as well. Again, check and mend your fences regularly. Sharp objects that, you know, may be sticking out from the fence. Be careful of those things. And just talking about toxicity here, we want to keep our gardens and our landscapes organic. So like glyphosate is an example of a non-organic herbicide that's used commonly to prevent weeds. And if you do even use an organic herbicide or pesticide that's labeled organic, still be careful about the toxicity in terms of you want to keep those locked away just like you would inorganic herbicide or pesticide if you choose to use those things, because a lot of those organic products are a very strong vinegar or a very strong concentration of cinnamon or cloves, and they can hurt the skin, and of course if they're ingested would be very damaging. So just because it says it's organic doesn't mean that it's safe to have around your children and your pets. They can be very irritable and toxic, like an inorganic one to us. The main thing that you want to consider is again, going back to the soil, maintaining our healthy soil sponge. The healthiest plants come from healthy soils, period. The healthier your soil is, the more nutrients it has, the more minerals it has, the better your plants will be. And so, you know, I've maintained an organic garden for years. I've never used any kind of pesticide or herbicide. And I mean, of course I get some damage from insects, but it's not like my crops get decimated. And that's because I maintain my soil. I use worm castings regularly. I make sure I'm topping off with compost. I use mulch to keep the soil moist and protected from weeds. And I really don't have a problem. And also, you know, kind of similarly, when you're working with kids and pets in the gardens, we want to manage our own expectations for the result. You may not have a perfect garden where every leaf doesn't have any holes in it if you're doing it organically, but what's the bigger goal? What's the more important thing? Just like if you have your kids and your pets in the garden with you, they may do damage, they may get into things, but what's the bigger goal for having them and intentionally working with them in the garden? Talking about some of the questions about toxicity from plants, we want to keep in mind that there's different levels of toxicity that are from plants, going from, you know, major toxicity down to very minor. And even within those levels, it really has to do with the dose, kind of the amount of that plant that is ingested potentially that actually does the harm. We want to keep in mind our kids and our pets' tendencies again when we're designing our gardens, but we'll talk a little bit more about that too. So talking about plants that may be toxic, the highest level is a level 1. So this is severe illness or even death if ingested in large quantities. So angel's trumpet, Azalea oleander, the sago palm. These are very common plants that you'll see out there in the landscape. I could walk around in my neighborhood and see almost all of these plants in my own neighborhood. And personally, I'm not worried about it because I'm careful about what my kids are doing. I know I'm monitoring, you know, where they are and just being aware of what's in my own space as well. And this is just why we're talking about this. The level 2 minor toxicity, so from a poinsettia, for example, or bird of paradise, if they're ingested, it could be more like gastrointestinal issues, rarely life-threatening. And again, the effect is, depends on the age of your child or pet and the dose that they have ingested. So just, you know, as we're talking about these things, we're just saying if you notice any of these symptoms and there may be those types of plants around, just so that you're aware of those things. Level 3, oxalate containing plants. So it's more like skin irritation or if ingested in the mouth or digestive system. So this would be, you know, the actually rhubarb leaves, begonia, monstera. So there's indoor plants that this is true for, as well as some outdoor plants. I think this is the cutest picture. The dog with the huge rhubarb leaf. The rhubarb leaf is toxic to humans and animals, but of course the stem isn't. So that's another thing to consider in this little discussion here. The level 4 dermatitis, it's more like an allergic reaction on contact. So poison oak, the sticks on fire, commonly seen, you know, in certain areas. That's just if there's a milky sap, a lot of times it might be that type of issue. So we want to protect our kids and our pets from as much as we can from these mostly common plants that we see around. So again, know your own kids and your own pets, use your judgment on their temperament and their, tendencies. Be aware, just kind of do an audit of the existing plants around your space and where they might go, and just be aware of potential dangers and levels of toxicity. So if you do see them chewing on a plant, you see that happening, then you can know you may want to do something about that by calling poison control, or just wait and see if there's any kind of reaction. Up to you. And then you want to set up clear rules for your kids and commands for your pets that might help with this. So some things that you could do is garden markers and signs, of course, fencing, supervision, and providing attractive non-toxic plants for chewing and playing away from things that potentially could be toxic. And then we can get growing. So how do we put all these kind of puzzle pieces together in this topic? So getting started with a site analysis, this is something that for any type of garden is a great thing to do. These are things that I go through with my own clients in my landscape design business. So some questions to answer: where is north? Where is the sun and where is the shade? And how's my soil? So as you're getting started in your space and you want to design or redesign, these are great basics to know. Also, what plants do I already have in the space? Where is my water source? And if my plants need water, how will I get that water to them? You can do a quick analysis or more in-depth analysis if you'd like. What are the safety issues? How do my kids and my pets already use the space? So like I talked about earlier, if you have a dog and you see that dog patrolling, they love patrolling on the fence where people walk by, and they're just back and forth on that fence. Knowing that that's your tendency for your pet, you probably don't want to plant some beautiful perennial garden bed there, right? So if they're already using that space for something, maybe do your perennial garden in a different location. If you know your child loves to be and play under a certain tree, maybe that's where you're going to do some special design element. So start with the analysis of what's already happening. Where's the shade? Where's the sun? What do my kids and my pets already do in the space? So yeah, play, rest, patrol, where do they already do their business? So again, just doing the most to go with what they already do will save headaches down the line. You can create a basic plan here to get started. So just a graph paper, each square can be, a foot, and measure it out, the perimeter. You can notate where the windows are in the house if you'd like to do that, the walkways, and then here's where you might note where there's maybe an element that provides a lot of shade, or if you have a place in your landscape that already has a lot of water that collects. So these are some examples there. And if you have taken the garden design class, this will be familiar to you. If you haven't, then you may consider taking the garden design webinar to get you started on this kind of exercise. So this is, again, thinking about all these important details about doing your garden design. And then you get to create your plan. So if we're talking about gardening with kids, don't forget to invite kids into the process. So they love being a part of the process, and the plan that they get to help create, maybe draw with you, can also become maybe an art piece for you in your home. So as you're creating your plan, then you could ask, you already know kind of what's already happening, what's already existing. Now you can ask, what do I want for the future? So what plants or garden elements do my kids or my pets want to have? What would they like to do in the garden? Again, keeping in mind their tendencies, keeping in mind the way they might see things differently than you, and get their input on all these things. Just to review, you might want to include play features, natural play features like steps, stones, bridges, jumps, and ladders, places to rest, shelter, and have time with their friends, and then your designated potty area. Could be for kids too, who knows? Outdoor learning, art, the edible gardening, wildlife features, your water element, and potentially your natural lawn. So here's a simple landscape plan on paper. This is really just about where to put plants, but you could also see those, the blue kind of circles in the middle. That's a swale or a dry creek that somebody has included into this design, and they've decided where they want certain shrubs and plants. But this is where this is how you could also include, your elements if you want. The potty area here and the play area here, for example. And as you're planning for the future, just be realistic, just keeping in mind that your kids and your pets have limitations, they have proclivities, they may do damage, and that the garden may need to change over time as your kids and your pets age. So just being flexible with this. I mean, I know that's one of the hardest things about parenting humans and animals, is just that ability to flex with what's going on, while also keeping good boundaries and safety in mind for them. Try to be as open-minded as you can. Unless you have to say no, say yes. You would say no if it's too much of a safety hazard or too much destruction. But again, just reminding us, we want the garden to be an adventure for them. We want our children in particular, or neighbors, kids, or grandchildren, or whatever kids are in your life, we want them to appreciate the outdoors, appreciate nature, and in connection with, our topic, our host here, we want them to care about water conservation. And if they don't have a connection with the natural environment, they don't have a connection with the outdoors, how are they going to really appreciate the importance of water and water conservation? Just some quick specific activities that you could do with kids. A gardening journal is always great. Handmade plant signs with them. You could post your garden plan up with them. A gardening chart, for the whole family, just to keep them active on a weekly basis. Treasure hunts in the garden. Think about things that you could do in the garden area that you may do inside, do it outside. And remember to celebrate with the kids, celebrate harvest, celebrate what they've explored and found and discovered, such as new growth on plants. Lots of resources here. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just so that you're aware, and maybe they'll get emailed to you as well. Lots of resources for you. So as we move into kind of we're going to talk about the Q&A questions that may have come up. And while we're doing that, if you would please do this evaluation, we would really appreciate your feedback. We're always looking for new information, new topics, new content, any information about presentation. We're completely open to all of that. We would love your feedback. And as you're doing that, then Marianne could kind of talk about what were, if any, Q&A questions that came up.
Sure. I'm thinking if you want to actually stop sharing, then we can bring up.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Questions.
Okay.
So there was some great questions, and then I had a couple for you as well. I love this presentation. I think, as you mentioned, we have become, unfortunately, more and more disconnected from nature, and we forget. It's like nature is there and then humans are here, and we forget that we really are all one thing. And it really is like we just get further and further disconnected from home. So this is such a beautiful way of inspiring and making all creatures welcome in the garden. So it's kids and it's pets and it's seniors and it's young families, that everybody can enjoy the garden in lots and lots of different ways. All right, so the first question we got was, and some of it is specifically related to pets and some of it were more general questions, but I think other people might have been curious. So the first question is, what is permeable paving? So you talk about it in the very, very beginning. And oftentimes it's, when you think of permeable paving, you may think of flagstone or concrete pavers. And in between it, you can put gravel, you can put pebbles, you can put plants, you can put mulch. Sometimes what people will do when they are trying to get more permeability is they will take a concrete pad, for example, and then break it up. And it's almost like a puzzle in that you then take the pieces and you pull them apart so that you have gaps. So that's the key thing. And then in between that, you can go ahead and get creative. But permeable paver can also be things like, if you want bricks, you can set it on sand instead of a concrete base. So that can be, people will ask about decomposed granite. That one gets a little bit more, for me, nebulous, in that sometimes folks will get decomposed granite and then they add a stabilizer to it. Well, once you add a stabilizer to it, you basically turned it into concrete. And also over time, it can get kind of mushy. People say, it gets a little gritty. That grit can come into the house. But it certainly has a look that works with gardens. So that is a possibility. Mulch is considered. I wouldn't call it permeable paving per se, but it is a permeable surface. And then the last one is, there's actually permeable concrete. So it is specifically designed so that the water can make its way through. It looks like concrete. Maybe it's a little bit more porous looking. And the one thing you have to be aware with that is that it does need to be kept clean. So every now and then you need to vacuum it or sweep it. And, just maintaining that those gaps don't get so full of sediment that it defeats the purpose. So that was a conversation about permeability, which is super important. Whether it's, Nick, you look like you're about to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on about pavers and permeability in relation to our landscape rebate program. So we have a requirement that we need permeability if you want to put in any pathways, pavers, anything like that. But Amber mentioned some really great things that are, I would say exceptions or ways to work around that and not have that area reduced from your rebate total. And that's to put those stepping stones. If you wanted to put a flagstone paver, but not mortar it in concrete or seal it in any way, that's also totally compliant with the program. And I think, from a financial perspective, that can be a lot cheaper of an option, right? You don't need to really hire anyone. If you're not comfortable doing concrete work, you could go and buy a nice stepping stone and install it as needed. So just bringing it all back to some rebate program.
Yes, for sure. Thank you. Yeah, really good to know. And how, another beautiful way of working with it is interplanting it with herbs. So, you have a edible, as we bring it back into what would kids enjoy. So you've got pavers, and then you've got things that you can nibble on along the way and all of that. So second question, looking for a lawn replacement for a dog. So I will mention what I came up with, and then Amber, I am very open to what you may have done for your clients or in your experience. So one of the big ones is Carapia. Does really, really well in full sun. It spreads. It's very, it is a tough plant. A couple of things about it, because somebody came right back and asked about it. Does it have bees, or will it attract bees? So pretty much anything that blooms will attract bees. But with Carapia, you can mow it. So, once it starts coming into bloom, either with a weed whacker or with a mower, and it basically cuts off the flowers, and then you won't get the bees. The other thing, which Amber talked about in the presentation, was the possibility of overseeding your existing lawn. So it's not going to qualify for a rebate, But with the proper prep, which includes things like dethatching, aerating it, so you get like pockets where you can get oxygen into it, adding compost, and then overseeding it with things like clover or wildflowers, and then also not mowing it until it hits about 4 inches. So all of that means that ultimately it becomes more resilient, uses less water, and can definitely be more tolerant of animals and kids running over it. So are there other things, Amber, that you would recommend?
Those are the most common things. I mean, I know people are concerned for dogs for like foxtails and things that like barbed things that could get stuck into their paws or into their, coats and things like that. So that's just a matter of keeping whatever you have there mowed and, weed free as much as possible. And then just as far as, I don't know if the question is more about durability for running on or the urine issue. But yeah, the Carapia is pretty hardy. Yarrow is used as a substitute as well. Same idea, you've got to keep it mowed down, but yarrow is a native plant. It has very feathery leaves that are soft on the paws, and it's pretty hardy too, I think.
It's
Clovers, yeah.
soft on the fingers as well and the feet.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it blooms. It does bloom, so that's another.
Yes.
So I saw that third question was about the bees, but I actually think that is a great. I'd like to come back to the bees because unless you are truly allergic to bees, where if you get stung, potentially you can have a reaction to it that can be life-threatening. As we talked about in the very beginning, we've gotten afraid of so much. So I was wondering, Amber, sort of what your take is on bees, or how maybe there's opportunities for compromise, because we have to give our bees an environment where they can do their job, their very important job.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that is a tough one. People are afraid of bees, and like you said, we really, really need them. And so when you're working with children in particular, part of it is trying to, well, the first thing is to regulate yourself. So anytime you're working with kids, whatever the, emotion is that's coming up for you, the anger, the stress, the fear, the first thing that we do is self-regulate that, because we know that our children pick up on that right away. So whatever you can do for yourself, if you are afraid of bees, whatever helps you to self-regulate, soothe yourself in the moment to calm down. So breath work is very helpful. Those same things we can do, we could teach our children as well. So the more we can regulate our own systems to be calm in fear, the better we are to help our children to do the same. So I know, again, going back to the initial poll of why we're here, a lot of us are concerned with the stress that our kids are under and the anxiety that they're feeling. And so when those feelings come up, whether it's bees or, anything else, how do we teach our kids to regulate those emotions? So breath work, calming down, staying still. We know that the bees will get agitated if we're like, like this. So reminding kids, and I, I've said it a zillion times, is like, the critters that are out here are not actually interested in you. They're interested in getting pollen. They're interested in getting food. They're interested in exploring, this beautiful space out here. They're not typically very interested in you. So if you leave them alone, they tend to leave you alone. And if you're calm, they will stay calm. So again, just remembering we're all connected. The way we are in the world affects the people and creatures around us as well. So that's all I got. We stay calm. That's help everything.
And I think that's a big thing because, I get clients all the time who say, well, I want flowers, but I don't want bees. And it's like, well, they go hand in hand.
Yeah.
And so certainly some of the design choices I think you can make is if you want flowers and you want to invite, because it's not just bees, it's, butterflies come and moths come and all of those other, is perhaps you put them, in the back of a garden bed, and then you have
Right.
maybe grasses in the front, which aren't going to attract it. Or, put them further away from the path. So, what are the areas where people are gathering or where people are walking through is then, you have a setback. So even if they're bees, they're not right
Yeah.
in your face. Obviously, if there's actually a beehive, that's a
Mhm.
different story. And then you bring in a professional to relocate it.
Right.
They are given a new home. And yeah, I remember you get the bees, and that's the first thing you do. You like swat.
Yeah.
They just
Right.
they get scared. So
Mhm.
that's their natural reaction.
Yeah.
So as we sort of wrap up the evening, if there's any last questions, pop them in there. Is there anything you kind of want to make sure that we walk away with that, as you're thinking about kids and pets, what's a big takeaway?
For me, it's kids have a great ability to keep us in the present moment because they need our attention, they need our supervision. So there's a gift when we can embrace kids in the gardens and animals too. Our pets keep us in the moment, they keep us aware of what's going on around us. I mean, how many times do you hear people saying, I didn't walk the neighborhood nearly as much as I do now that I have a dog. Their dog is the one that got them outside and exploring. I didn't meet my neighbors until I had a dog, and then all of a sudden I know all these people. So just embracing what kids and pets can do in our lives and doing what we can to um, involve them into our activities because time goes quickly, you know, and we can enjoy them in our garden as much as we can, then we'll be happy about that in the future.
And I think it's also an opportunity for us to remember what it was to be a child.
Mhm.
I think, the opportunity for grown-ups to sort of relax and have fun.
Oh yeah.
There's so much going on, and, work and dinner and chores, and that being in the garden, I think is the opportunity for all of us to relax a little bit and remember.